You know what we need more of in the fighting game space these days? Tag fighters. I feel like it's an underserved niche within the genre that could really benefit from modern technology.
I can't even say that with a straight face.
Okay, but for real though, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a ton of tag fighters coming out these days. Like, a ton. Whether it's older tag games getting a surprise refresh, currently released ones to sink your teeth into, or upcoming ones on the horizon, you are absolutely spoiled for choice when it comes to tag team fighters. I'm a tag enjoyer myself, and even though my tag series of choice is likely to be MIA for a good long while, I can appreciate other games attempting to fill in the niche. But it wasn't always like this. Dedicated tag team fighting games used to be a lot fewer and farther between. In fact, a lot of the time, tag fighting was an alternative gameplay mode in fighting games. And that's what we'll be taking a look at in this video. Traditionally 1v1 fighting game series that have implemented tag team modes in their games at one point or another. Note that I won't be talking about games in a 1v1 series that get a dedicated tag entry, so no Tekken Tag Tournament or King of Fighters 2003 or 11. This will be strictly for tag modes in games where the 1v1 fighting is the default general experience. As always, this video isn't meant to be a catch-all for all of the fighting games that fit this type. This video is just meant to showcase the ones I thought would be most fun to talk about. If there's any examples not listed in this video, be sure to drop a comment. It'd be great learning about more examples of this in fighting games. All that said, let's get started. Personally, when I think about recurring tag team modes in long-running fighting game series, Dead or Alive is instantly the first one to come to mind. DOA itself has always been pretty fast and flashy compared to other 3D fighting games in the space, so a tag mode actually does suit the series and the breakneck pace that fights potentially run at. Tag battles were first implemented as a separate gameplay mode in the original arcade release of Dead or Alive 2, though it had to be enabled via the game service menu. The Millennium update for the arcade game, which would become the basis for the better-known Dreamcast release of the game, would feature it as a mode that could be played from the start. You choose two characters and fight other tag teams on a versus CPU ladder, being able to tag in your partner during a match by pressing hold, punch, and kick at the same time. As in other tag games, the character not in use will gradually recover health while their partner is active. The real treat with tag mode, though, comes from the special team interactions. Depending on whether or not characters have a relationship with each other in the series lore, you can get some special interactions before, during, and even after a fight. For example, Lei Feng and Jan Li have special intro and outro animations with each other thanks to the rivalry they have with each other in DOA's story. And similarly, Bass and Tina Armstrong have special intro and outro animations, being a father-daughter wrestling duo. It gets even better though. Some tag teams also have special cinematic tag throws, which do more damage than the regular throw and are probably the closest thing the series gets to cinematic supers prior to Dead or Alive 5. Like the intros and outros, these are also character dependent. Kasumi and Ryu have one, for example, as well as Ayane and Nine. You initiate these by pressing forward along with hold, punch, and kick. Interestingly, as DOA 2 saw several re-releases in the early 2000s, more tag throws would be added to the game, with the game's Xbox remake Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate having the most unique tag throws per character of any version of the game, some of which were backported from DOA 3. Speaking of, Dead or Alive 3 retained the tag mode from 2, but began expanding the tag functionality beyond just one dedicated mode, allowing you to play time attack and survival in tag mode, as well as allowing you to play training mode with it, which is great for lobbing out tag-specific combos. The button combo for tags was also simplified here as well, now simply being done with the free and punch buttons. DOA 2 Ultimate, which uses DOA 3's engine and mechanics, reverts back to the DOA 2 input, though a new motion done with a quarter circle forward in the 3 buttons was added for tag teams with multiple unique tag throws. DOA 3 also introduced a new type of tag as well, attack change. This allows the incoming character on attack to come in with an attack instead of the normal tag, which does leave the incoming character strike and throw vulnerable for a bit. Between attack change, being able to actually play training mode in tag mode, and the expanded tag throws, DOA 3's where tag mode really started coming into its own for the series, slowly getting expanded on in future games, notably getting its own ranked online mode in DOA 5 last round. It's also worth noting that DOA 3 onwards also features 4-player multiplayer in tag mode, allowing 4 players to 2v2 each other, each player picking a different character, kinda like the Cross Fever mode in the Dreamcast port of Marvel vs. Capcom 1. Basically, 2xKO before 2xKO was a thing. DOA 4 also extended this functionality to its online tag mode as well, which is pretty cool. DOA 6 unfortunately removed the tag modes altogether, which sucks, even though it's probably the least of that game's issues. There's one more entry to touch on though, Dead or Alive Dimensions on 3DS. For the uninitiated, Dimensions is essentially a handheld conversion of DOA 4, with a lot of its single-player content retooled to retell the events of Dead or Alive 1 through 4 via its Chronicle mode. I think it's personally the best fighting game on 3DS, and it still looks pretty incredible today despite it being an early 3DS game. Dimensions retains some tag functionality, but it's different to say the least. Here we have tag missions, which are basically fights against predetermined opponents instead of a randomized ladder. That's not the weird part. The weird part is that while you do choose two characters, your partner is, for whatever reason, computer controlled. The CPU partner pretty much tags in and out of their own volition, which is not only disorienting, but also kinda defeats the purpose of the mode in the first place. I've always wondered if this was a compromise made due to 3DS hardware, because it's an otherwise really baffling design decision that undermines the spirit of tag fighting in the first place. You think Capcom tag games and the Versus games are probably the first thing you think of, and for good reason. Marvel vs. Capcom in particular is probably the tag team fighting game series. That said, Street Fighter itself has flirted with the idea a few times. I was actually initially going to talk about Street Fighter EX3 here, but the more I played, the more I realized that EX3 is more so a tag game at heart, that just so happens to include 1v1 modes rather than the other way around. However, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max on PSP ended up being more in the lane of what I wanted to discuss. Alpha 3 in general is up there with Marvel 2 and Capcom vs SNK 2 as what I like to call everything in the kitchen sink fighters. Essentially, the combination of the game's large rosters and numerous system mechanics turn them into games with a plethora of unique ways to approach them, the isms being Alpha 3's calling card. Home versions of Alpha 3 are also known for their numerous single-player modes, like Survival, World Tour, and Dramatic Battle to name a few. When people think of Alpha 3 Max, the bonus characters are usually the first thing to come to mind, and for good reason, but it also got a few extra modes, one of which being Reverse Dramatic Battle, a mode that had only ever been in the Sega Saturn version before that. The other new mode was Variable Battle. Variable Battle is essentially Dramatic Battle, as you and another character go up against a CPU ladder consisting of one opponent per stage, but instead of two characters being out at the same time, a tag system is implemented instead. The characters tag in very similarly to the Capcom vs games too, usually entering the screen with a flying kick. Unlike those games though, tagging isn't done by pressing both heavy buttons, but instead by pressing a punch and kick of differing strengths. This button combo feels kind of awkward if I'm being real. It wouldn't be a problem on an arcade stick, but because Alpha 3 Max is a PSP exclusive, I think retaining the Versus series input for tagging would be less cumbersome, and also wouldn't overlap with any of Alpha 3's inputs for mechanics as well. While your characters retain their normal health values, the CPU opponents have boosted health to accommodate the fact that they're fighting two characters, one at a time, so this mode does get quite a bit tricky the further in you get. There's no secret tag combo supers or interactions here though, this is a pretty box standard tag mode overall. There is some neat stuff you can do if you manage to get a counter hit on your tag in attack, but that's about the most source unique to this mode that you'll get. It is worth noting though that, like in the dramatic battle modes, the guard bar is disabled, so you and your opponent aren't punished for turtling like Alpha 3 usually does. This actually makes the fight against Final Bison somewhat easier, as the threat of a guard crush from him is quite literally non-existent now. I think this is a neat addition, but also a really bare bones one. It feels like they just kinda tacked it on to tout just how much new content the PSP version has. I enjoy it, but it does feel like one of the more shallow implementations we'll be talking about here. Fighter's History Mizoguchi Kiki Ippatsu is a game I knew I had to talk about in this video, not just for fitting the criteria, but being, at least to my knowledge, the very first traditional 2D fighting game with tag team fighting of any sort. This one's a spin-off of sorts of the Fighter's History games, being partially based on Fighter's History Dynamite, or Karnov's Revenge as it's better known in some circles. Interestingly, this one is Japan exclusive and only came out on the Super Famicom, and it makes some cuts, particularly to the roster. There is an interesting new character though. In the spirit of Karnov doing the same in the first game, this game's final boss is the star of another Data East game, Chelnov, the protagonist of the Atomic Runner Chelnov games. As the subtitle implies, this game puts Mizoguchi front and center as the protagonist, featuring a standard arcade ladder as well as a humorous story mode centered around him as well. This game is somewhat feature-rich for a 1995 Super Famicom fighter though. In addition to the aforementioned story and arcade ladders, there's also a survival mode and a training mode, both of which are common now but were very much a rare luxury in console fighters back then. Most interesting though is the tag mode, the first of its kind for the genre. Before we even get into the mechanics of it, it should be noted that this mode supports the Super Famicom multi-tap, allowing for up to 4 players to select a character for 2v2 tag action. Kind of insane for 1995, and doubly so considering this is the first real crack at tag fighting in the genre. After choosing your 2 characters, the match starts and you can instantly see that things are a little different in tag mode. Similar to how Kizuna Encounter would do things a little over a year later, this game's tag mode features dedicated tag zones. You can only tag out your character while in these zones, and you can only tag out on the side that you start on, left for player 1 and right for player 2. There's no restrictions on how often you can tag out, but there is a brief pause when you can tag out as the game quickly loads the next character in. The music also resets too, both of which are likely a hardware concession, which makes sense. If you want to be truly degenerate, you can actually use this brief loading pause to buffer an action you might not have done in time otherwise, like sneaking in a quick anti-air. Though you can't use your opponent's tag zone yourself, there is an interesting interaction there. Notice how the screen flashes and I lose health in the opponent's zone every time I'm not in block stun? The implication I'm assuming is that your opponent's tag partner is attacking you from behind as you stand in their tag zone, which adds a neat little wrinkle to things. Generally, you don't want to be in your opponent's corner in this mode, since that damage adds up. Characters also have separate life bars as well, though you win a round by KOing at least one character on a team. For being essentially a dry run at what tag fighters would eventually become, this is pretty well thought out. It's definitely hindered by the hardware limitations of the 16-bit Super Famicom, but what they got implemented is insanely impressive for what it is. Again, Kizuna Encounter actually went on to borrow the idea of a dedicated tag zone to facilitate swapping, so it's possible that mechanic may have even been inspired by this game. If you've never played this, give it a try sometime. It's one of the better 16-bit fighters out there. When people think of 6th-gen anime tie-in fighting games, the Dragon Ball Z Budokai and Tenkaichi games are probably the first to come to mind, and deservedly so. They're pretty cool. One licensed anime fighter I remember having a ton of fun with as a GameCube enjoyer growing up as a teen was the Naruto Clash of Ninja series. These were 3D fighting games based on the series developed by our good friends over at Aiding. They originally released really early on in the GameCube's life cycle as Naruto Gekito Ninja Taisen in Japan, but were localized in the mid-2000s to capitalize on the series' growing popularity in the West. The first 2 GameCube entries released in North America and Europe in 2006, but the 3rd and 4th entries, having released earlier in 2004 and 2005 respectively, remained a Japan exclusive. Gekito Ninja Taisen 3 particularly added the 3-man cell mode, which allowed you to form a team of 3 characters for a fight. This wasn't a tag team mode though, but instead more akin to the King of Fighters. However, GNT 3 does include cinematic team supers, which are contextually based on the composition of your team. Then we come to Gekito Ninja Taisen 4, a game so beloved it still enjoys a small dedicated community and competitive play to this day, essentially being the culmination of the games up to that point. GNT 4 retains the 3-man cell mode from the previous game as well, but also adds some new features to the base combat, which I'd like to briefly touch on before moving forward. Most important is chakra cancelling, more commonly referred to as Y cancelling. When you do an attack that has launching properties, you can press Y to spend 25% of your chakra meter and instantly reset your character back to neutral, denoted with a quick glow and your character taking a stance. This can particularly be used to extend combos, and is where a lot of the game's advanced combo structure is derived from. It should be noted, however, that Y cancelling also scales the damage of your follow-up combo. In a lot of ways, it not only feels similar to Roman cancels and Guilty Gear, but it also feels like the prototype for what would eventually become the Baroque mechanic Aiding would eventually develop years later for Tatsunoko vs Capcom down the line. This damage scaling, however, can be mitigated with another technique, stance breaking. When you Y cancel when your character briefly poses, you can actually do one of 2 things. You can immediately attack, or you can move in a direction. If you choose the latter, the damage for the follow-up combo doesn't get scaled, but instead has its damage scaling reset entirely, allowing for far more damage to be dealt. Note how the damage for the regular Y cancelled string does a little bit under half of Neji's health, while the stance cancelled one does a little over half of it. Now, going back to 3-man cell, one pivotal addition was made to it. You now have the option to tag in your other team members as long as you have the chakra to do so, done with the Z button. There's 2 types of tags. By holding back in Z, you'll do a neutral tag. This one has your partner enter in a neutral state and is pretty basic. It's a safe way to tag in if you get a hard knockdown and want to switch safely. By just pressing Z without a direction though, you get an offensive tag, where your partner will come in doing an attack. What the attack is depends on which character is tagging in. Sakura, for example, comes in with a dashing sliding punch with an optional follow-up, while Sasuke comes in with a dive kick that pops the opponent up into the air if it hits. In the latter's case, Sasuke can actually combo off of it on hit too. You can also tag mid-combo as well, allowing for neat little tag combos like this. So if you combine Y cancels, stance breaks, and mid-combo tagging, you can start doing some really cool stuff, though defensively, you can also use substitution to get out of it. You can easily bait that and put your opponent in a situation where they have to eat the damage though. It should be noted that characters not only have independent life bars, but atypical of most tag fighters, also have their own individual meters, which allows for a lot more flexibility and a lot more chaos. The series gets a little complicated release-wise after GT 4. Essentially, the series landed on the Nintendo Wii and would split into two distinct branches, one specifically for Japanese audiences and one specifically for North America and Europe. The former would become Gekito Ninja Taisen EX, while the latter would be known as Clash of Ninja Revolution, each branch with its own unique content, but borrowing mechanics and roster choices from each other, Clash of Ninja Revolution 2 in particular, featuring new original characters alongside a new original plot. The first Clash of Ninja Revolution would drop the tag functionality, but it returned in Revolution 2, though the squad battle mode was strictly 2-on-2 this time. Only neutral tagging is available here though. Tag supers are also present here as well, having generic ones for all characters and special cinematic ones for certain pairings. Revolution 3, now based on Shippuden, is where things get really interesting. Offensive and neutral tags return from GT 4, but you can also now call in your partner to do a Marvel vs. Capcom style assist by pressing down in the tag button. Interestingly, while this does take up chakra, it only depletes it from the assisting character, not the character that called the assist, preserving resources for the point character. Every character has a unique assist, and how they can help varies. Tamari, for example, slashes her fans twice, and although they blow the opponent pretty far away, the initial hit can still be comboed from, and thanks to how chakra works with assist calls, can be used for confirms in the super. Honestly, you can't go wrong with most aiding fighters, and even the most budget ones are still pretty fun. Playing GT 4 again, it's easy to see why it still has a scene to this day. If you still have a Wii or a GameCube kicking around, give these a try sometime. Mortal Kombat is already a series known for its alternate gameplay modes, especially during the 6th console generation, so I guess it was only a matter of time before they gave a tag mode a crack, and fortunately, the game they attempted it in was the already godlike Mortal Kombat 9. MK9 had a tag mode that allowed for 2v2 matches with several tag mechanics, and though the mode had a ton of really broken overpowered setups, it was also incredibly fun. There are several general tag actions that you can perform during a match. Some combo strings, for example, can be capped off with a tag in, which can seamlessly continue into a string from the incoming character, depending on the circumstances. Some attacks, notably launchers, could also be cancelled into a type of tag known as fast tag, which also allowed the incoming character to continue a combo from the previous attack. You could also perform an offensive tag by pressing forward twice in the tag button, which had your incoming character enter while doing a special attack. The attack is predetermined per character and takes 1 bar of meter. Pressing down, back, and the tag button calls in your tag assist. This is similar to something like the Capcom Vs games where your partner will come in, do a quick attack, and leave as quickly as they came. With these mechanics, you can string together some pretty wacky combos that did pretty decent damage for how low execution they were. Most interestingly, tag mode could also be played with 4 separate players in 2v2 matches, which is a pretty cool feature to include. Unfortunately, MK9 is pretty much the last time we saw this mode in any capacity in the series. According to Ed Boon, the reason why it's never returned is because not many people ended up engaging with the mode in the end. Sadly, there's more evidence pointing to him being correct than there is otherwise. The tournament standard mode for the game was 1v1 as you'd expect, but when side tournaments and exhibitions would run the tag mode, people would still play it like a 1v1 game. No one would utilize the tag mechanics for any team-specific setups or anything, and that kind of tracks. The tag mode is pretty much an entire meta unto itself, and at least among competitive players, it was more in your best interest to learn the tourney standard meta than the fun silly side mode. It's a shame though, because I think it's one of the best tag modes in this entire video. I kinda feel like MK9's tag mode particularly, and Boon's reasoning for it not returning, is kind of emblematic of the state of video game development in general these days. Why pour resources into a mode that only a fraction of consumers are going to engage with, let alone actively explore? I mean, I get it, but it is unfortunate. Mortal Kombat 11 would feature tag gameplay, but in a very limited capacity in some of the towers though, and Mortal Kombat 1 seemingly has a mostly functioning tag team mode hidden in its code, discovered by modders. I assume the development team shifted priorities there though, leading to it being unfinished and more or less scrapped. Alright, before we finish, let's go over some honorable mentions. Soul Calibur 4 has a tag function unique to some of the story missions in the game, as well as the Tower of Lost Soul single player mode. It's relatively bare bones, but it is dictated by a new meter in the bottom corner of the screen and can be used to string together some wild combos. Tekken Advance, a Game Boy Advance conversion of Tekken 3, also surprisingly has a 3-on-3 tag mode. You won't be stringing any crazy tag combos in this one, but it's actually pretty wild to have a 3v3 tag mode on GBA hardware in general. Guilty Gear X Advanced Edition also features a tag battle mode as well, and the way it's implemented can lead to some pretty insane stuff. Loading Games has a really in-depth video on the mode that goes into much more detail than I can muster that I highly recommend watching. I'll link it in the description. The Bleach Heat the Soul games, also made by Aiding, also started implementing tag battle mode from Heat the Soul 5 onwards as well. SNK vs Capcom Match of the Millennium's default mode is 1v1, but there's two alternative gameplay modes as well. One is fittingly King of Fighters style, 3v3 as you'd expect, and the other is a tag system, your characters coming in with a dynamic kick when tagged in, like in Marvel vs Capcom. Considering Match of the Millennium already has some pretty overt nods to MVC, this was likely included as a nod to that series as well. That's going to do it for this video. As always, if there's any examples not mentioned in the video, let me know in the comments. And of course, shoutouts to the patrons that support the channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.